Hi, everyone. Are you thinking about analyzing your qualitative data? Are you thinking about using a software called NVivo and you don't know how to use it? This video is for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you step by step how to analyze your qualitative data using NVivo. So let's go to the screen. So imagine that you have interviewed 5 people and you want to learn about the causes and the solutions of burnout among primary healthcare physicians. This is your demographic information. You interview 5 participants, you collected their demographic information, your research question that you want to address. What are the causes of burnout among primary healthcare physicians? And the second research question is what could be done to reduce burnout among primary healthcare physicians. So imagine that you have interviewed them, you have finished interview, you have transcribed your audio, and the next step is to analyze your data. The first step that you have to do is to clean your transcript. This is a transcript that I have. It has already been cleaned. Cleaning means that you are making the transcript ready for analysis. How do you make it ready? You have to take out all identifiable information from the transcript. And also you can give them participant ID. You can see participant 1 or P1. And I have the person demographic and also their responses. It's not a lot of data because this is an actual interview. This was done for just a demonstration purpose. So it's not an actual research. So that's why it's not a lot of information here. But the lesson here is that clean your data, make your data ready for the analysis, right? So you can see that I don't have any identifiable information there, like participant name. When you are saving that information, you have to save it based on the ID you gave to participants. So here, P1, P2, P3, P4, P5, right? And then if you plan to bring demographic information into NVivo, you can put them in Excel spreadsheets like what I have here. The first column will be the participant ID. You see here that the ID should be the same as how you save your data or how you save the transcript. Why is it important? Because when you send the transcript and also the demographic information into NVivo, the system will match the IDs that you have given to participant and the name of the file. So that's why the name that you have given to the file should be the same in the first column here, right? And then you have your demographic information. You don't have to send your demographic information in NVivo if you are not planning to compare and contrast, let's say, gender or experience with the data based on the themes that you got, right? If you are not planning to do that, there's no need for you to bring demographic information. But if you have an intention to do some comparison to see in terms of gender, what kind of theme that came out of the data that can be connected to maybe male or female, then you can bring demographic information. So it's not required, but if you think that you have to do further analysis after developing the themes, then you have to consider bringing the demographic information. See here, I have my demographic information in Excel spreadsheet. Then you can close it when you finish. The same way, when you finish cleaning your data, you have to close it before you try uploading them into NVivo. Another thing that you have to think about is you have to label your research question. So you see here, I've given a label for my first research question, which is burnout causes. The second research question is burnout solution. It's very important to label your research question. As I said in my previous video, it helps you to organize the code based on the research question that you have. You see the usefulness when we go to NVivo. When you are ready, you go to NVivo. If you want to get access to NVivo, you have to go to their website and download the software. You can use this for 14 days for free, and they have student version that you can purchase. So you just see the one that is okay for you so that you get access to the software. So imagine that you have access to the software and you open it. This is what you're going to see. you're going to start a new project, right? So you can see here that there's a recent project. If you already use this software, you have your recent project here. If you want to go straight, you can click on the project and then you go there. But if you want to use a new project, you go to new project and you give it a title, any title that will remind you. So maybe I will say project 2. You can give a description, it's not required, but if you have a couple of projects and you want to really make sure that you want to know what the project is about when you want to go back, then you can give a description, but it's not required for you to give a description. You can also think about where you want to save that information, right? So you can browse your computer and then decide where you want to save. Do you want to save it on the desktop, or you want to save it under a document, or you want to create a new folder? So you have to determine where you want to save this project. You can keep a log of your actions. This one is if you want to go back and see the steps that you took in analyzing your data, you can check that, and the system will keep track of how you were analyzing your data in case you want to document that process. It's not important to me, so I will not check that, but it's an option for you to check. Then you go to next. Here, if you want the system to automatically save your work as you are doing it, you can click on the yes here. If you want to save it yourself every 15 minutes, then you can check yes here. But I want the system to automatically save for me. It's safer that way. The next one is to think about recovery. This is where, in case you want to recover your project, this is the place that you can go. So you can browse and decide where you want to save that information. Just like a second way of saving your project in case you want to get access to it and you are not finding that when you go to where you initially decided to save. So when you finish everything, you click on create project. This is what you're going to see. If you want the system to show you what the functions are, you can click on next, but you can skip if you don't want the system to give you a tour. And then you click on close here, so you can get an empty space here. So the next process is to upload all your transcript and your demographic information if you plan to do that. So the first step is to go to import. But before we go, I just want to give you a brief information about some of the main functions that you can use if you want to import a file, a Word document, video, images. You can click on files and then import that. If you want to import a survey, you'll be able to upload that information into the system. So there are many options here, but I'm going to limit myself to the files because we just have a Word document to upload, right? And capture is when you have information online that you have downloaded, and then upload them into the system for you to analyze. The next step is to click on files, and then you get access to your transcript. So I have 5 transcripts. So I click on the first one, and then I click on Shift and click on the last one. So I'm using Windows PC. You can bring them one by one, but it's good for you to select all of them at once and then bring them. So what I do is I click on the first one, hold on Shift and click on the last one so that I can select all of them and click on Open. Then I click on create a case for each imported file. I talk a little bit about this in my first video about NVivo overview. So what this one is going to do is it will create a file for each participant. So in this case, the system is going to create 5 files. So the file will contain participant transcript, participant demographic information, and the themes and the code that you developed connected to that participant. So each participant will have a file or a folder that has all the information connected to the participant. So the system is asking you, do you want to create a case or a folder for each participant? And then I said, yes. One thing that you have to note here is that it's going to be the same kind of process if you have transcripts for focus group, right? And you have only one document, it can ask you to create a file. You don't have to create a file when you have only one document because it's for all the participants in the focus groups. So you don't have to create a file. but it doesn't hurt to create a file for each document that you bring. Let's say you did interviews, so you create a file for each participant, and also you did a focus group, you can also create a file or a case for them. So to make things easy, just check here, and then it will ask you about, you have to give a name for the whole case. So I will just say participant, and then click on import. So here I have all my files here. I have all the participant transcript here. The next step is to import the demographic information if you plan to do that. If you want to import the demographic information, you go to import, you go to classifications, and then you select import classification sheet. You click on that, you go to browse, and then you look for the Excel spreadsheet. You make sure that you close that Excel spreadsheet before you import. So you click on that, you click on open, and you go to next. You don't have to do anything here. You just have to make sure that you select case classification, and you go next, and you click on as name. Remember, we created cases for each participant. So what it's going to do is that the system is going to connect the demographic information to their respective cases, right? So participant P1 will have its demographic information in that case. It will be the same thing for all of the participants. So you click on OK, then you click on next. You click on finish, and then what will happen is that you have your demographic information here, right? You don't have to do the next step I'm going to do, but in case you want to make sure that the system has connected the demographic information to the cases that you have. So what you have to do is you can go to explore, you go to map, and you click on project, and then you type test, because you're just testing whether the system has connected the demographic information to each of the participants. So you click on OK, you right click here, you click on add project. So let's try to find out whether demographic information have been connected to participant P1. So you select P1 transcript, and then it will come here. You right click on it, and you go to show associated items, and you go to cases, and then you double click here. Now we have the case that we created for participant, and then we have the transcript. So you have to click on the case, right click on it, and show associated items, and you go to attribute values, and then you go down here and you click on age. So it shows here that participant P1 age is 37, participant P1 is female. You double click on that. 12 years of work experience, and the person is African American. When you open a case, you have participant demographic information and also the transcript here. So you see, this is to show that the system has connected the demographic information to the transcript. And you can make it nice by going to this place. You can change how it's showing, right? You can go here, you can change it the way that you want to make it look like. If you want to export this one, you can right click on it and click on export map, and you will be able to export. So this is just to check whether the system has done the connection, right? So if you finish, you can close it. So the next step is to develop containers for each of the research questions. In case you have research question, if you don't have research question, you can create containers based on maybe the purpose of the study or the research aim or objectives, right? The essence of you creating the containers is to help you to organize the code under each of the research question or research objectives that you have. So what do you have to do? You go to codes, you click on close here, you see empty space here, you right click and click on new code. And then what you're going to do is I have to look for the name that we gave to the first research question. So the name for the first research question is burnout causes. So I just copy that, and then I put it here. So for the research question, but before I type, it's always good to remind yourself that this is for research question 1. So in parentheses, RQ1, and then here you can give a description, but the description you can just copy and paste your research question there just to remind you that this is for research question 1, right? You see how simple the process is. It's so simple if you understand what you are doing. And then you click here, aggregate coding from children, right? The reason why you have to do that is, let me show you this PowerPoint here. I think you understand it better if I show you this, or if you look at my previous presentation on this one. So when you go here, we see here that burnout courses, you have 14 here. If you check aggregates, the one that I show you that you have to check, right? What it does, it's adding everything that you have here and automatically putting that number here. It shows the number of significant information connected to each of the codes. So we have 2, 1, 1, 1, 4, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. If you add everything up, you get 14. So here, what you are telling the system is automatically tally everything for me. If I bring a code under this research question, right, and I drop significant information into them, right, add all the number of significant information and put it up there. That's what you are telling the system. That's why you have to check this one, right? Then you click on OK. Let me show you what I have here. So I have for the research question 1, I'm going to do the same thing for research question 2. You right-click this space and click on New Code. And then the second research question is burnout solutions, right? So before you bring the burnout solution, in parentheses, RQ2 for research question 2, and then you copy and paste the research question 2 here. And what you have to do is to click on the same way, aggregate coding from children. You can choose the colors, but I don't see the need for now. So I just leave it like there and click on OK. So now we have containers for the research questions, right? And then what we're going to do is that we're going to do the coding. That's the fun part. The coding, we're going to generate containers under the research question that we have and select the significant information and drop them into the containers. But let me give you some background information so that you can understand the coding process. Before you start the coding, there are some things that you have to be clear about. You have to ask yourself, what kind of analysis are you doing? Are you doing content analysis or thematic analysis, or you are using grounded theory analysis, right? Any kind of analysis that you are doing, you have to be aware, because if you are doing content analysis, what you have to do is that you have to create the containers that you're going to put the significant information into. All the codes, you have to create them under each of the research question before you start the coding process, right? So you kind of create codes under each of the research question if you are using content analysis. So content analysis is where you create the containers or the codes before you go through the transcript to identify significant information and drop them into the containers that you have under each of the research questions. If you are doing thematic analysis, you don't create containers first, right? You only create containers for the research question, but you go through the transcript, identify significant information, then create containers or codes and put them under the respective research question that you have. So you see the difference. So you have to know the kind of analysis that you are doing. Another thing that you have to know is the kind of coding strategy that you are using, right? What coding strategy are you using? Description focused coding or interpretation focused coding, or you're using something different like NVivo coding and other coding strategy, teaming code. Depending on the kind of coding strategy that you are using, then it will help you to decide how you can create the codes, right? The content of the code, right? For this example, I'm using description focused coding. The reason being that I asked participants a specific question about the burnout causes and solutions, and they have provided that information to me. And my research question is about burnout causes and solutions. So I'm just describing what participants are giving me, right? or I'm describing what participant gave me. I'm just like a reporter going through the transcript, identifying significant information, and then trying to develop codes to represent those significant information at the same time addressing my research question. So that's what that's why I'm using description focused coding. You could use interpretation focused coding if you think that you have to make sense of the data before you can address your research question. The distance between the data and the research question is very wide. The information that you need is implicit, is inside, is embedded in the data that you cannot just describe what participant is telling you, but you have to make sense of it by considering who is saying what and what kind of circumstances participants find themselves in, so that you can develop a code that best represents participant information at the same time addressing your research question that you have. So now that you have decided, the next step that you have to think about is whether you're going to do bracketing, right? Bracketing is reflecting on your past experiences, your preconceived ideas, the biases that you have, and setting them aside so that they will not overly influence how you are making sense of your data, all right? So it just, making sure that you allow the data to speak to you. You are developing themes or code based on what the data is telling you, not based on what your experiences are. Because in qualitative analysis, we are an instrument, we are making sense of the information, and our background and biases that we have can influence how we are making sense. So you have to be aware of your background and biases that you have. Set them aside as you are making sense of your data. Back to NVivo. Now that you have created the containers for the research question, the next step is to start the coding process. How do you do that? It's very simple. You click on the files, you double click the one that you want to analyze. So I double click participant P1. I can put this one in so that everything will show. Then I click on code so that the research question will show here, because I'm going to code stuff and put them in under the respective research question that you have. Coding is all about going through the data and identifying significant information. So assuming we are going through data and then we identify something that is significant. So what did we identify? Let's say the person said long hours. So we think that this long hours is addressing the first research question, is because it talks about the burnout causes, right? So then you have to think about, okay, what phrase should I use to represent this information? So a phrase could be having long hours. It could be in between 2 to 5 words. Having long hours reflect what participant is saying, at the same time helping you to address your research question. So when you decide a code that you want to create, you right-click on the research question, you click on new code, and then you bring that information here, having long hours. That's the code representing the significant information. The description option here, you can provide what this code means, right? What this code represents. So you can type, this code represents participant expression of spending a lot of time at work. It's not required for you to give a description, but in case you want to come back and remind yourself what this code represents, then it's very important for you to operationalize this code. It's going to be helpful for you, especially when you start thinking about categorizing the code. You can go back. But if the code is so obvious, you don't have to write a description. Then you click on here, aggregate coding from children, and click on OK. So you see here that I have a code here, but it's empty. It's an empty container. So the next step is to drag and drop. So you see when I drag and drop, now it's one here. This means that one file, participant connected to this code, and one reference, one significant information that I've dropped in this container. If you want to know what is in this container, you can double click and see what is in the container. So I double click and see what is in the container, only one significant information that are put in this container. You can close it if you want to. So this is one way of doing the coding, right? There's a second way of doing it. But I like this one because it's easy. You right-click on the research question that you want to create the code and click on the code, and you can put that information there. Another option is to, let me show you another option. Let's look for another significant information. Numerous clinical and administrative tasks that can address the first research question. Now that we know that this information is significant, one way of doing the coding is right-clicking on it and go to code selection, and you click on the research question that you want to code this information under. So I want to code this under the first research question, and then click on child code. Child code means that it's going to come under a parent code. The research question is a parent code, and this one is a child. So you click on that, and then new code. So here you just type that information there. So that information will be having numerous work-related tasks. So when you finish, you click on code selection to new code, and then that information automatically come here. So you see here that the container has already been filled with this information, right? You have already put that information there, so you don't have to drag and drop like what you did the first time. The first way of doing it is right-click here, you create a container, and then when you finish, drag and drop. The second option that you could do is select that information here, you go to code selection, and then do that. Follow that steps that I gave you. So that's another way of doing that. The third way, you select that code. So thinking about this, no work-family balance will best represent this significant information. Then you can click on this one and click on code selection, and it will take you to this place, and you select the code and then click on child code, and then type that information here and click on code selection to this one, and then you can go selection to then this label, and then it will take you to this part. So you see how there are many ways of coding your data, but the one that I like is where you easily create a container here and then drag and drop. So that's how the coding process is. There's another information here that we can also code: spend time in prayer and reflection. So this one is part of research question 2, right? So what do you have to do? You have to decide what code can you use to represent the information at the same time helping you to address your research question. So the code is engage in meditation will be the best code. So you right click here, new node, you bring that information here, and then you can give a description. If you don't want to do that, you could go, you just check here and then click on. So as you can see, it's an empty container. You drag and drop that into that container. So that's how the coding process is going to be. You go through your transcript, identify significant information, and create containers, right? And you drag and drop them. So that's how the coding is done. Imagine you are doing the coding and then you want to stop and take a break, right? And you reach this stage. What you can do is that you can click on edit, you check edit, and then this information will come. And then it looks similar to Word document toolbar. And then let's say you will reach this part, right? You can just change the color from black to any color that you want, maybe blue, just to remind you that you have reached here. And then, when you come back, where you want to continue the analysis, right? So that's another way of a way of determining where you reach. So that's what I have for you concerning the coding for the first participant. When you finish the first participant, you close it, and then you go to file and then double click the second participant transcript, and then click on code so that the code will be showed here. And then the same process, when you see something that is significant, let's see whether we can see something for the second participant that is significant. There's something significant here. This is in relation to having numerous work-related tasks. We have already created container about having numerous work-related tasks. So what you have to do is just drag and drop it into that container and see how the number will change. Here is 2 because this is the second file that's connected to this code, and it's 2 because you drop this second significant information into this container. So it's 2 for the number of significant information and then 2 participants connected to this one. This is the strategy. When you are going through your data and you identify significant information and you decide the code that you want to use, look into whether you can drop it into any of the existing code. If you cannot drop them because it has no relationship, then you create a new code. So let me give you an example. So this multiple patients is quite significant. It's about taking care of multiple patients. So this one, none of this code is connected to this one. So what you have to do, you have to create a new code. So you right click here, click on new, and type that information, the name of the code, and then click here and click on OK. And then you drag and drop it into that. As I said, the principle is that you identify significant information. If there's no existing code that can do that, what do? You create a new container or a new code and drop them into that. So when you open a container, you can see that you have the significant information in there. So you can see 2 significant information. And then you can click here to see where you did the code. What is the source, right? So you can click on the source. Let's say you are coding and then you change your mind concerning the code that you want to use to represent the significant information. You can right click on the one that you have changed your mind on and then click on code properties. And then you can change anything that you want here, right? You can add anything and change it. You can also add information here if you want to. And then you click on OK when you finish. So, and if you want to change something here, you can click on it 2 times, and then it can give you the chance to change the name here. But the easier way is to right click here and go to code properties, and then you'll be able to make any change that you want and click on OK. Let's say you made a mistake and brought this code under the first research question instead of the second research question. You select it and then drag and drop to the second research question. So you see how it came to the second research question. If you want to bring it back, you select that and then drag and drop into the first research question. So you can easily drag and drop stuff. If you want to bring it outside the 2 research questions, maybe you realize that, oh, this code has nothing to do with the first research question, right? Or the second research question. And I just want to put it aside and maybe put it under other findings or just put it aside. You can drag and drop it into the code so that it will be outside here. I drop it here into the code tab and then it will come here. If you want to bring it back, you drag and drop it there. Let's say you are creating codes and the codes are so important, but it has nothing to do with the research question that you have. You can create another container called other findings, check aggregate and click on OK. And then you'll be able to create codes that, they don't belong to either the first or the second research question, but they are important that you want to look at it later. You can bring it to other findings, right? But at the end of the day, what you have to do is that you don't have to code everything that you see in the data. You are coding things that are going to help you to address your research question. Another thing that you have to think about is that normally we don't code based on your interview questions. You are not coding to address your interview questions. You are coding to address your research questions, right? At the end of the day, you want to address the research question. You are not addressing the interview question. The interview questions helped you to collect data from participants. The research question is the one that you have to use the interview responses to address, right? But not using the interview responses to address the interview questions. So you always have to be aware that at the end of the day, you are addressing the research question, not the interview questions. So that's what I have about coding. If you have any question, you can drop it in the comments. I'll be happy to address them for you because I want you to understand this process, right? How to do the coding. Some of the functions might not be relevant for you to get a basic understanding, but I'm just showing the ones that are important for you to use. I'm going to show you how to categorize the code too in my next video, right? So this is what I have for you concerning the coding process, and I'm going to show you the final product. This is how the final product will gonna look like. So as you can see, I have my first research question and all the code that have been created here based on the data that I have. If you follow the step that I provided to you, this is what you're going to see. You can see that we have a lot of codes, right? And you can just go ahead and do the presentation of your findings, right? You have to think about categorizing the codes based on the similarities so that at the end of the day, you have themes, maybe about 5 or 6 or 7 themes addressing each of the research questions. Normally, so because we have a lot of codes here, we have to move on to the next stage to categorize the code so that we can develop themes and use the themes to address our research question that we have here. So you can do the categorization inside NVivo or you can do it outside. My next video, I'm going to show you what's the best way of doing the categorization to develop themes to address your research question.